The day my wife told me she needed space, I didn't cry. I fixed a leaky faucet. I thought we were just going through a rough patch, until I found out who she really left me for. I stood by the window, quietly watching as the car backed slowly out of the driveway. It lingered for a moment, then turned right and disappeared down the street. What struck me most wasn't what I felt, it was what I didn't. After 10 years of marriage, you'd think there would be a wave of emotions crashing over me. Grief, anger, even nostalgia. But instead I just stood there, motionless, and gave a small, detached shrug. Maybe I should have felt something more, some kind of sorrow or a pang of regret. But all I felt was blank. Nothing. Just a strange, numb sort of stillness. I shook my head, almost annoyed with myself, and turned away from the window. I figured I might as well do something with my hands, so I headed into the kitchen to finally fix that leaky faucet that had been bothering me for weeks. As I walked toward the sink, my mind couldn't help but rewind and replay everything that had just unfolded in the last 30 minutes. I had just come home from work, expecting the usual, quiet house, maybe the soft smell of dinner on the stove. But to my surprise, Emily was already there, sitting at the kitchen table. A nearly full glass of red wine was resting in front of her. It wasn't strange that she beat me home. She'd done that a few times before, but it was unusual enough to catch my attention. What really unsettled me, though, was the vibe. No dinner on the stove. No casual greeting. Just that untouched glass of wine and a heavy silence that seemed to fill the whole room. Emily hardly ever drank, and the look in her eyes told me she hadn't poured that wine for the taste. Without any small talk or hesitation, she looked up and asked me to sit down. Her voice was low, almost defeated. There was something looming behind her words. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat across from her, trying not to show the unease creeping into my chest. She looked straight at me, calm but clearly weighed down by something, and said, "Matt, I think you felt it too. Lately, things between us just haven't been the same." She wasn't wrong. We'd been distant for months, caught in this fog where conversations were shallow and time together felt more like obligation than connection. But hearing her say it out loud still stung. She went on, "I can't even tell if it's coming more from me or from you, but something's shifted. I've tried bringing it up before, but every time I do, you just tell me it's a rough patch, that we'll get through it like we always do." Then came the words I didn't expect, even if, deep down, I probably should have. "I've been thinking a lot, and I think we need some space. Not a divorce," she added quickly, "just a break. A separation. I need to be on my own for a while, Matt. I just need to step back, Matt," she said softly, her eyes fixed on the rim of her wine glass. "I want to take some time to reflect on my life, on our life, and figure out how we ended up feeling so far apart. Maybe some distance will help us see things more clearly from a different angle." I leaned in a little, trying to keep my voice calm. "Emily, come on, it's not like our marriage is falling apart at the seams. Every couple hits rough patches. We can work through this, but we have to stay together and actually talk to each other." She gave me a weary, almost pained look. "Talking isn't going to fix it this time, Matt. That's part of the problem. You think this is just about emotional distance, about us not being physically close anymore. But it's more than that." She paused for a long moment before continuing. "You keep offering solutions that lead us back to the bedroom, thinking that if we can just reconnect there, everything else will follow. But the truth is, I don't want to be intimate with you anymore. I don't even fully understand it myself. I still love you, I do, but when you touch me I flinch. I don't know why. Something inside me just pulls away." Her voice cracked slightly and she looked away. "I need time, Matt. Time to figure out what's going on with me and with us. This isn't about throwing away the years we've built together, it's about figuring out how, or if, we can find our way back to each other." Then she stood up and said, almost as if she had rehearsed it, "I've packed a few things in the car. I'm going to stay with my sister for a while, just until I find a place of my own. I'll call you once a week, I promise. We'll stay in touch." Before I could really respond, she glanced at the clock. "I have to go. I told Mary I'd meet her at 7. And just like that she walked out the door, no hug, no kiss, no last lingering look, just gone. The finality of it hit hard, even though I hadn't let myself react right away. It didn't take long for the silence in the house to feel deafening. At first we kept things quiet. The news of our separation didn't travel fast, and for a while, it was just between us and a handful of people. Most of our friends, once they found out, offered support, encouraging me to stay strong and keep my head up. They tried to keep my spirits up, even when I couldn't pretend everything was okay. True to her word, Emily called every week. Each time she'd ask how I was holding up. I kept it brief, I told her I was managing. Then I'd gently ask how she was doing. Her response was always the same, I'm fine. Then I'd ask the question that weighed on me the most, even though I already expected the answer. Are you ready to come home yet? And each time her voice would turn quiet. Not yet. Weeks slipped by like that. Conversations that felt like polite check-ins rather than anything hopeful. And then, the rumors started. Whispers. Half-spoken comments. Things that made my stomach twist. That's when the whispers started getting louder. Rumors that Emily wasn't living alone like she claimed, but had actually moved in with another man. At first, I completely dismissed it. I couldn't let myself believe it. I held tight to what she had told me, to the version of the story I wanted to be true, that she just needed some time alone to sort through her emotions and figure things out before coming back home. But those rumors kept gnawing at me like a splinter under the skin. I couldn't shake them no matter how much I tried to brush them off. Eventually, I decided I couldn't live with the doubt any longer. I had to know the truth for myself. So I started digging. Quietly. I tried to find out where Emily was staying. My plan was simple. Keep it low-key, maybe ask around, do a little bit of personal sleuthing to either confirm or completely shut down the rumors. But every lead I chased came up cold. Nobody I asked seemed to know anything, or at least nobody was willing to share. Doors closed politely. Questions were deflected. The more people avoided my inquiries, the more uneasy I felt. Feeling cornered and frustrated, I finally opened up to two of my closest friends, Tom and Tay, while we were having dinner. I didn't hold back. I laid everything out for them. My suspicions, my failed attempts to get answers, and my growing desperation. I even told them I was thinking about hiring a private investigator to track Emily down, just to get some real answers. As I spoke, I caught a look between Tom and Tay, just a quick glance but heavy enough to make my stomach sink. It was the kind of look that says, "We know something you don't." Tom let out a quiet sigh and said, "Matt, don't waste your money. You won't like what you find, but the rumors are true." I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. "What are you saying?" I asked, even though deep down I already knew. "Most of the people who care about you already know what's going on," he continued, his voice gentle. "But none of us had the heart to tell you. You're just too important to hurt like that." I stared at him, waiting for the blow. "Tell me." Tom hesitated before finally saying, "Emily didn't leave to be alone. She left to be with Adam White." "Adam who?" I asked, baffled. I've never even heard that name. "He works with her," Tom said quietly. "They'd been seeing each other for a while." I sat back stunned. So she just moved in with him? That doesn't make sense. If she wanted to be with him, why not just ask for a divorce? Why all the vague talk about needing space and time alone? Tom looked at me with something like pity. "You know how Emily is, Matt. She thinks 3 moves ahead. She wanted to keep her options open, just in case things didn't pan out with this guy. She needed an escape route if real life with him wasn't everything she imagined." He paused for a moment before continuing, "From what we've gathered, she'd been seeing Adam for nearly a year before the separation. When she finally pulled the plug, she did it in a way that let her test the waters without completely burning the bridge with you." I looked between them, feeling like the walls were closing in. "So you're telling me everyone knew? And nobody thought I deserved the truth?" Neither of them spoke. That silence made my blood boil. I stood up, tossed my napkin onto the table, and said bitterly, "Thanks. Thanks a lot for finally being honest." And then I walked out. On the drive home, I couldn't stop replaying that conversation. The betrayal wasn't just from Emily anymore. It felt like it had spread into every corner of my life. Everyone had known. Everyone but me. And just like that, the wait was over. The next day, everything changed. A few days later, I scheduled a meeting with a private investigative firm called Corliss Investigations. I paid a sizable retainer up front and gave them every detail I had: Emily's workplace, her position, the name of the man she was supposedly involved with, Adam White. I asked them to dig up anything they could on the two of them. I wanted facts, not rumors. I needed to see the truth laid bare, even if I wasn't sure I was ready to face it. When I got back home, I sat down at the dining table with a blank notepad and started drafting a list of things I'd need to do if I decided to end my marriage for good. I wasn't ready to make any moves yet, not until I had the full report from the investigators. But I wanted to be ready. I didn't want to be caught off guard if Emily decided to pull something. One thing I was sure of: if she caught even a whiff of suspicion from me, she'd act fast. That thought sat in my gut like a stone. She was smart and calculating, and if she thought I was onto her, she'd likely make her next move before I had the chance to react. That evening, I went into the home office and pulled out 5 certificates of deposit we'd tucked away in plastic sleeves, hidden at the back of the drawer. I didn't touch the originals. Instead, I made clean copies of each one at the bank's copier upstairs. I slid the originals back exactly where they were, neatly sealed and untouched so nothing would seem out of place. I knew Emily well. She'd only go looking if she suspected something. And if she did, she'd find everything exactly as she left it. At the bank, I casually brought up the topic of using our joint CDs as collateral for a line of credit, playing it off like I was thinking about renovating the house, maybe adding a pool and a jacuzzi. I made sure to mention that the account was under both our names. The employee nodded and confirmed that, because we had previously refunded the amount we'd drawn on the line of credit, the account was still open and fully available. That moment clicked something into place for me. I'd been confused, angry even, about why Emily insisted that I stay in the house after she left. She was the one who asked for space. She was the one who initiated the trial separation. So why didn't she ask me to leave instead of walking out herself? Now I understood. If I stayed, I'd assume she planned to return. I'd keep waiting like a fool, thinking she just needed time. Meanwhile, she was laying the groundwork for something entirely different. Later that night, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Tom and Tay standing on the porch, their expressions hesitant but serious. They came in without much conversation, sat down in the living room, and after an awkward silence, Tay finally broke it. "Matt, look, we need to talk," he said, clearing his throat. "You leaving dinner like that the other night, it caught us off guard. It really stung." He paused, clearly unsure how to continue, and I could already feel the familiar pressure building in my chest. I opened my mouth, ready to respond to Tay's comment, but before I could get a word out, she raised her hand gently and asked me to let her finish. "We understand why you walked out, Matt," she said, her voice calm but tinged with emotion. It still hurt. You're our friend and we've always cared about you. We never meant to make you feel betrayed or excluded." I stayed silent, letting her words settle. "It's a complicated situation," she continued. "Emily's our friend too. We were hoping she'd come to her senses and realize what she was walking away from. You're a good man and we knew you still had feelings for her. That's why we didn't know how to tell you." I frowned, feeling a rising confusion. "Tay, I'm not sure what you're talking about." She hesitated for a moment, then looked directly into my eyes. What she said next knocked the air out of me. "To be completely honest with you, Matt, Tom can't have children. He's infertile. And we've talked about it for a long time. We want a baby. We were hoping you might help us." I froze, completely stunned. I blinked a few times, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. "You're asking me to?" "Wait. You just said you believed I'd never betray Emily," I said, still trying to process everything. "I did believe that," she replied quietly. "But that was before you found out the truth about what she's done. Now that the trust between you two is broken, you're not bound by that same loyalty anymore." I didn't know what to say. My mind raced. Everything felt surreal. Tay reached out and gently placed her hand on my knee, not seductively, but with a quiet sense of pleading. There was an unspoken intensity in her gaze, as if she knew exactly how conflicted I felt. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no either. I just stood up, torn between disbelief and a strange pull I couldn't quite explain. My heart was a tangle of emotions: betrayal, anger, confusion, and maybe a sliver of something else. Longing, maybe. Tay stood too, and in a whisper barely audible she said, "No promises. No labels. Just, do your best. Help us start a family." There was a silence between us so heavy it felt like it had weight. In that moment it wasn't about love. It wasn't even about desire. It was about broken people trying to make sense of things that no longer made sense. And still, even then, I hesitated. Would I have been able to go through with this if I knew Tom was home? That question lingered like a ghost in the room. Tay must have read my expression because her eyes softened. "Don't worry, Matt," she said quietly. "It'll be okay. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out." "I promise," Tay said softly, her voice almost like a whisper meant to soothe the storm. And just like that she was gone, leaving behind a silence heavier than the words we'd exchanged. Later that same day I got a call from Tom. He invited me out for a drink after work, said there was something we needed to talk about. Something difficult. I agreed, even though my stomach churned with the weight of everything hanging between us. Sitting across from a man I had known for 2 decades, a man whose wife I had just crossed an unimaginable line with, was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. We clinked glasses out of habit, but the moment was hollow, forced. Tom took a slow sip of his beer, then finally spoke. "Look, Matt, I know this is strange, painful even, but I wanted to be honest with you, man." I listened, my chest tight. "I love her," he said, staring down at the table. "Tay, She's everything to me. I don't know what I'd be without her. And that's the truth. But if I ever found out she'd gone behind my back, if she'd actually cheated on me, I couldn't stay. I just couldn't live with that kind of betrayal. He took another drink and then looked up at me, eyes sincere. But this? What we talked about? That's different. It's not about betrayal. It's about survival. She wants a child. And I can't give her that. I've made peace with it, but she hasn't. He paused, clearly struggling to keep his emotions in check. If she found what she needed somewhere else, outside our marriage, without my blessing, I think that would have destroyed me. But this is different. We're trying to face it together. I could hear the desperation in his voice, but also the honesty. I couldn't deny the logic behind his words. I knew what Tay wanted. I understood what Tom needed. And somewhere deep down I even sympathized. But I still hate the secrecy, I said quietly. The deception, it's what's eating at me. If things were out in the open, maybe it wouldn't feel so twisted. Tom nodded slowly. I get that. I really do. That's why I wanted to talk. Tay thinks this might save our marriage. And honestly, I'm not against it. But I can't do this unless you're on board with it too. I need to know that you're okay with what we're asking. That you want to help. He looked me dead in the eyes. Matt, I'm asking as your friend, can I count on you? I couldn't respond at first. My mind was spinning. Everything felt surreal, like I was living someone else's life, watching it unfold from the outside. But the sincerity in Tom's face grounded me. After a long pause, I gave a slow nod. Yeah, man. You can count on me. That Sunday, I invited Tay over again. By the time I got home, I had already made up my mind. I wasn't sure if what I was doing was right or even rational, but in that moment, it felt like the only path forward. Still, in the back of my mind, another issue loomed. What was I going to do about Emily? I felt like I had tried everything, waited, hoped, looked for signs of reconciliation. But now, there was only one move left. I would quietly access the home equity line of credit, while Emily was still unaware, and use it before she had a chance to interfere. It felt calculated, maybe even a little cold. But after everything, I couldn't afford to let her keep control of the situation. I had already made the decision to consult with a lawyer. The plan was to start preparing all the necessary documents to dissolve the marriage, to put everything on paper and make it official. But for some reason I kept delaying the final step. Something inside me hesitated, whether it was the weight of a decade spent together or the part of me that still clung to the hope she'd come clean, I couldn't quite say. So the paperwork sat in limbo, waiting. Over the next 5 weeks, my connection with Tom and Tay deepened in unexpected ways. We met regularly, sometimes at their place, sometimes at mine. I spent more time around them than I ever had before, and the three of us developed an odd kind of rhythm, born out of mutual understanding and quiet, shared grief. It was strange, familiar, even comforting. I knew deep down that I was going to miss Tay. I had started to care for her in a way I hadn't expected. And yet, even in the midst of that new bond, my heart was still tangled up in Emily. I still loved her, even after everything she'd done. But that love had changed. It wasn't hopeful anymore. It wasn't naive. Even if she came back tomorrow, I knew I could never step back into the relationship we once had. That version of us had died the day she walked out. I never said any of this to her, though. I kept my thoughts to myself. When Emily and I met during our weekly check-ins, she would sit across from me and spin stories I no longer believed. She claimed she was seeing a therapist now, said the sessions were helping her unpack some deep-rooted issues. I nodded politely, listening as she filled the silence with vague self-help jargon. She told me she was making progress, that she just needed a little more time. Her voice trembled when she said it, like she was afraid I might give up on her. I didn't have the heart to tell her I already had. She even tried to convince me that her relationship with Adam White was over, or on pause, or complicated. She never gave a straight answer. Just more emotional smoke and mirrors. All the while I kept thinking, if you really wanted to come back you would have. But you haven't. Meanwhile, Adam White had problems of his own. He was deeply involved with the Fraternal Order of Eagles, a title-holding member, proud and rising fast in their ranks. Word had it he hadn't missed a single meeting since being elected sergeant at arms. He was apparently considering a run for an even higher office after a few encouraging conversations with senior members. But on one particular Wednesday evening, that upward momentum came to a crashing halt. As he stepped out of the lodge after one of their weekly meetings, feeling upbeat and hopeful about his future, something unexpected happened. Just as he reached his car outside his apartment complex, A sudden sharp pain hit him with such intensity that he collapsed right there on the sidewalk. Everything went black. A neighbor spotted him minutes later and called for help. The details after that were sketchy, but the incident rattled the small circle of people who had been watching his rise. Around that same time I started making a few moves of my own, not out of revenge but out of a quiet sense of reclaiming something I'd lost. Control maybe. Dignity. I used one of Emily's unused Visa cards to pick up a couple of digital cameras. Gifts I passed on to Bill and Steve through a local home improvement chain. Her MasterCard, still active, covered the cost of a decent laptop and a 19-inch flat-screen monitor that I gave to Mike. Nothing extravagant, just a few things I felt others could use more than she ever would again. I didn't feel guilty. Not anymore. I sold a few more things along the way, some of them through eBay, including an old aluminum baseball bat that Emily unknowingly paid for, since the linked account was still in her name. I even gave a nice vintage item to Phil, just because I knew he'd appreciate it. By that point I'd taken 2 months off, 6 weeks of unused leave and another 3 weeks I was owed from work. I needed the time. Not just to breathe but to finish what I had started, to set things right in my own way. The investigation into Adam White's incident wrapped up, and the police eventually cleared me of any involvement. I hadn't done anything wrong, not legally anyway, but I can't say I didn't feel a strange sense of closure watching his fall from grace. Life has a way of evening out certain scales. With her reputation dented and her finances stretched thin, Emily lost the house. It hurt to see it go, even though I wasn't living there anymore. The place had once been ours. But now, it was just another chapter closed. She had to give up her Lexus too and ended up behind the wheel of a beat-up Kia. When I heard about it, I didn't feel joy. Just confirmation that she had finally hit the consequences of the choices she made. I had returned from a short trip to Mexico by then, needing distance from everything. When I got back, I didn't even consider moving near her again. Instead, I rented a modest apartment on the far side of the city, where I knew I wouldn't accidentally run into her at the grocery store or gas station. That distance wasn't just physical, it was peace. By now Tay was 5 months pregnant. And somehow she looked even more radiant than before. Her glow wasn't just physical, it came from a place of purpose and certainty. We picked up where we had left off, only this time we weren't hiding. No secrets. No guilt. We met up 2 or 3 nights a week, splitting time between her place and mine. The connection between us deepened with each visit. It wasn't just about the past anymore, it was about building something, however unconventional it might be. Then Emily called. We met up in a public place. She looked drained, worn down by the months of chaos and regret. But her words were as tangled as ever, half apologies, half attempts to rewrite the past. I still care about you, she said. I cut her off. Look, Emily, I don't want to keep playing this game. I've heard enough of your lies. She blinked, caught off guard. I want what's mine, I continued. You took money against the house. That was our home. Half of everything we owned was shared, whether you like it or not. She squared her shoulders. I don't owe you anything, Matt. Yes, you do, I said, firm but calm. I'm not asking for a favor. I'm asking for what's legally mine. Call it emotional damages, call it compensation, whatever your lawyer wants to call it. But it's owed. You're threatening me? She said, trying to sound bold. No threats, I replied. Just facts. If you want to drag this back into court, we can. You'll get a new ruling. A deadline to pay. And when that passes, because it will, you'll still be stuck with your lawyer's fees piling up while I sit here with nothing in my name you can legally touch. She was quiet. I don't have any savings, I added. No checking accounts you can freeze. The car I drive? It's a lease. You can't touch it. So go ahead, burn money chasing me through the system. Or we can settle this like 2 people who once cared about each other. I didn't say it to be cruel. I said it because I was tired of being the one who always had to take the high road. I live in a modest, furnished apartment now. It's not much, but it's comfortable and more importantly, it's enough. There's a strange peace that comes from having fewer things to tie me down, fewer memories packed into boxes. Emily once told me, you've made it impossible for me to repay you for everything I took from you. I didn't argue. She was probably right. But it wasn't just about the money. It was the silence, the distance, the way we never truly talked about the things that mattered. And now it was all gone, too late to fix, too late to explain. As she stirred the last of her drink that night at the bar, she muttered bitterly, you know, maybe if we just talked, really talked, things could have turned out differently. Life didn't have to be this hard. I stared into my empty glass for a moment before replying. Yeah, And you can be incredibly unpleasant when you want to be Emily. And me? Well, I guess I'm just the crooked villain in your story now. With that, I stood up, tossed a few bills on the table and said coldly, "Go ahead and enjoy your miserable life." Then I turned and walked out. I didn't look back. 3 days later, I received the official divorce papers. The reason listed? Irreconcilable differences. I didn't argue. How could I? The phrase felt almost too polite for what we had become. Not long after, another blow came, one that hit deeper than I expected. Tom, my oldest friend, had been keeping a secret. He had known for months, maybe longer, that something was wrong. Tay and I hadn't known. We thought he was just tired, maybe stressed. The truth? It was cancer. Quiet. Undetected. It had spread before anyone could do anything about it. When the funeral came, the grief hit like a slow, quiet wave. Tay handed me an envelope afterward. My name was written on the front in Tom's familiar handwriting, "For Matt's eyes only." When I looked at her questioningly, she just shrugged. "He didn't tell me what was in it," she said softly. "That letter's for you." Later that night, curiosity, and something heavier, got the better of me. I opened it. Inside was a letter. Handwritten. Simple. Honest. It wasn't just a goodbye, it was Tom's last attempt to speak truth one more time. He talked about our friendship, about the things we'd seen each other through, about how proud he was that I'd found the strength to let go of Emily. But what struck me most was his confession. He'd always admired the way I tried to carry everything myself, even when it crushed me. Then, unexpectedly, the letter shifted into something more personal, almost like a story from another life. He talked about Jason and Sarah, a couple we both knew back in school. Sarah was the kind of girl everyone saw as perfect. Beautiful, smart, athletic. She was the second best student in her class at Williamsport and probably the most admired girl in school. Jason was the golden boy, the West Point-bound senior who had it all. They seemed destined for each other. Until they weren't. When Jason left for West Point and Sarah went to Temple, they quietly ended things. Life pulled them apart, and that was that. I was 2 years ahead of them back then. I wasn't the top of my class or some future military star. I was just me. Studied engineering at a public university. I was decent. Quiet. Determined, but never one to shine too bright. Years later, somehow, Sarah became my wife. I don't know how I got so lucky. She was kind, loving, always treating me with respect. Even if deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't quite enough for her. She never said it. Never made me feel small. But that voice in my head, the one that whispered I didn't deserve her, never went away. At dinner one night, she reached under the table and gently squeezed my hand. It was such a simple gesture, but it struck me harder than anything. She believed in me. Even when I didn't believe in myself. So why did I still feel like I wasn't worthy? Maybe that's what all of this has been about, me trying to prove something. To myself. To the world. Or maybe to no one at all. All my life, I found myself compared to Jason Benson. He was the local golden boy, the kind of guy whose name people mention with admiration in every setting. Star athlete, sharp student, clean-cut future. To everyone else, he was a hero. And to me? He was a shadow I could never quite step out of. Even when I tried to shake off those old comparisons, they crept back in. It wasn't just the way others saw me, it was the way I saw myself. Like no matter what I did, I was still coming up short. That afternoon, I was deep in conversation with Jeff when April suddenly made a steal on the court, snatched the basketball clean from the opposing team's top defender and sprinted toward the hoop. She was focused, fierce, unstoppable. I fell silent and watched as she drove the ball in for a perfect layup. By the end of the game, she'd earned the title of top scorer. Again. I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride that she tried to hide behind her usual no-big-deal shrug. But I saw the glint in her eye. "This girls' league is going to be something special," Jeff said. "Gonna be a fun season for the kids." At the very start of the league, we'd all agreed that our goals weren't just about winning. We wanted the kids to learn about sportsmanship, working together, and pushing themselves without tearing each other down. It reminded me of something Coach Simons once said to us in high school, a message that stuck with me: play hard, play fair, and play for each other. Later that evening, back at home, June piped up with a teasing grin. "Dad, you always try to make everyone happy, except when you're playing against us. You never go easy on April or me." I laughed. "That's because you two don't need anyone going easy on you. You're tougher than most grown-ups I know." Both girls grinned at that. Sarah, ever the calm center in the chaos, was finishing up dinner. She'd built a life for herself that impressed even her toughest critics. Despite her parents' dreams of her becoming a lawyer, she followed her own path into hospitality. After college, she rose fast, becoming the general manager of a major hotel and conference center. She'd even turned down a promotion 2 years ago because it would have meant moving to Kansas. She didn't want to uproot the girls. Or me. That evening, something about her seemed different. She looked just a little more polished, a bit more composed than usual. "You look nice tonight," I said as I set the table. "Everything okay? You seem a little more dressed up than usual." Sarah hesitated, then smiled. "Just a long day of meetings? No big deal." But something about her pause made me wonder. Maybe it was paranoia, or maybe it was Jason's name echoing again from earlier in the week. Someone had mentioned he was back in town. Later, after the girls had gone to bed and we were alone, I asked her directly, "Was there anything special today? Any reason you didn't tell me Jason was back in town?" Her eyes flickered and then she sighed. "Matt, I didn't tell you because I knew it would upset you. I didn't want to dig up something that doesn't mean anything to me." "He still doesn't?" I asked gently. "Of course not," she said firmly. "You're my husband. You're the only man I've ever loved. Whatever people said back in high school, it's ancient history. Please don't read into things that aren't there." "I want to believe that, Sarah," I said, quieter now. "But when people bring up his name like he's still some kind of legend, it gets to me. It always has." She reached across the table and took my hand. "Then let's shut that chapter for good. You're not in competition with anyone, Matt. Least of all him." That night, June joked at dinner, "We're stuck with roast beef again?" I chuckled. "Leftovers build character." Sarah laughed along with her but gave me a look that said we'd have a better ending to the night than cold roast beef. June giggled again. "Looks like we better cover our ears later. Last time you two were exhausted, the walls were rattling." Sarah blushed, clearly amused and slightly mortified. "Maybe we should wait until they're asleep this time," she whispered as we cleared the dishes. "I don't want to confirm their suspicions. They already think we're running some kind of secret operation behind closed doors." We both laughed, and that moment of levity reminded me of how far we'd come, and how fragile yet valuable trust really is. The next night, as Sarah cooked dinner, I found myself watching her, not just admiring her but seeing her. She had always stood beside me even when I didn't feel like I deserved it. And still the question echoed in my mind. Why did I ever feel like I wasn't enough for her? This feels like one of those real-life tests," I said to Sarah as we stood quietly in the kitchen trying to catch a moment alone. She gave a half-smile. "You mean the kind of test that actually reveals who we are?" "Exactly," I said. "It's easy to say the right things when everything's fine. But when life really pushes you, when you've been broken, disappointed, humiliated, that's when character gets tested. And the people who stay with you through all of it, they're the ones who matter." Sarah nodded slowly, then her eyes softened. "You know what helps a lot, Matt? Just talking to each other like this. No defensiveness. No games. It's comforting. I didn't realize how much I needed that." She smiled and added playfully, "Besides, no one compares to my man." I chuckled, then pulled her into a tight embrace. She looked up at me and I kissed her, longer than I expected to. It felt real. Healing. Someone from behind us broke the moment with a laugh. "Maybe the two of you should find somewhere a little more private?" We turned to see April standing in the doorway with a smirk. "Just a reminder, this is the kitchen. You know, where food happens." Sarah's face flushed red and she instinctively stepped back. I, however, just laughed and held her close again. Let them think what they want. We earned this. Later that week, Sarah hosted a large community event. Part networking, part outreach, all well organized thanks to the team she had built in the city. It was supposed to wrap up by 6, but by 7:30, a stubborn crowd of loyal fans and hangers-on still lingered, drawn in by the free snacks and open bar. Anticipating the end of the evening, I quietly made my way up to Sarah's office. I wanted to surprise her with a small gift, delicate earrings I'd picked out just for her. My plan was simple: catch her before she left, hand her the gift, and invite her to a neighborhood party later that week. I figured she'd enjoy showing them off in front of friends. But as I stood near her office door, I heard voices from inside. I froze. Something in me told me not to walk in, not yet. I stayed back just far enough not to be seen but close enough to hear. "I married Jason," Sarah's voice said. I instantly felt a sharp pull in my chest. "My husband would have picked up on this right away," she continued. "He's not the type to get angry for no reason, but he's sharp. He sees through things." Jason's voice answered, low and calm. "He's not a fighter, Sarah. I've known men like him my whole life. No war stories. No bravado. PDA meetings and book clubs. Then came the part that made my blood boil. Greg took over our daughter's soccer team when the coach was hit by a car, she replied, her tone clipped. He didn't even know the rules. But he learned. He read books. He watched games online. And he showed up. Every practice. Every game. He might not be flashy, but he's dependable. And to our girls? That's courage. There was a long pause. I know we've shared memories, Jason said quietly. Unforgettable ones even. But those are yours now, not mine. I heard Sarah's voice, firm and final. Exactly. And with that, I heard Jason excuse himself and leave the office, the door shutting softly behind him. I stood frozen in the bathroom down the hall, afraid to step out too soon. My heart was pounding, not from jealousy but from the raw vulnerability of having overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. Eventually, I heard the outer office door open and close again. Silence. I stepped out cautiously, looked both ways, then made my way across the parking lot to my car. The earrings remained in my coat pocket.